Hey everybody, and welcome to Craft of the Yeti. We have officially advanced to the Feudal Age, and I'm going to show you how I built this village house, inspired by Age of Empires 2. The very first thing to do is to get the proper scale figured out. I'm using this 28mm figure as reference point. I've cut XPS to a few different heights as test pieces, and since I want this to be a village house, I'm going to go with a shorter 2-inch size. My doors will be the dimensions on this chipboard template. It's about the right height compared to the mini and the wall. I wanted to show you the design process I go through when I'm trying to replicate something. I've printed out a reference photo of the house from Age of Empires. I know that the door width I plan to use is 1 inch. On the printed paper, the door is about 5mm wide. From there, I know that about every 5mm on the reference photo is about 1 inch in reality. So I then go about sketching in a rough blueprint of the house. This isn't exact, but it works well enough for my purposes. Once I have the wall dimensions, I head to my hot wire cutter and cut XPS to the appropriate size. Of course, I'm using proper safety precautions. I cut everything off camera. As we've talked about, the walls are 2 inches tall, and I've cut them to be about a 1/4 inch thick. Here they all are ready to be assembled. One thing I forgot to consider was the portion of the wall that would extend upward with the roof. I believe these are called gabled roofs. I cut the appropriate pieces with my utility knife and a metal ruler. When the tops were ready, I glued them to the bottoms of the walls with hot glue. There is a seam here where the two pieces meet that I don't love, but we will address that later. There are a number of windows on this house, and I'm making them 1 inch squared. To get the windows placed properly, I drew both vertical and horizontal lines going through the center of the wall piece. I have a template that I made out of chipboard, which has the centers marked on each edge. I then align the template marks with the marks on the wall and trace around the template. Then I cut the window out with an X-Acto knife, taking my time and using a few passes per cut. Off camera again, I cut out a floor and ceiling for our house out of dollar store foam core. I just used the dimensions from my blueprint sketch. I then attached the walls to the floor first, and then to the ceiling. My hope with having the two pieces here was to keep the walls as plumb as possible. In the past, my walls have had a tendency to lean one way or the other, and this will hopefully prevent that. I'm learning, folks. I probably should have done the foil texturing before I attached all the walls, as I wasn't able to get into all the tight corners, but I'm still happy with the way this turned out. You may have noticed there are some gaps at the corners. We're not leaving those, they're going to be filled with square dowels. From the store, the dowels are pretty smooth, so I scratched them up using a sculpting tool my wife found for me. This exaggerates the wood grain, as you can see, and I'll cut and install the dowels with hot glue off camera. At this point in the build, I wasn't 100% on how I was going to do the roof. I thought I might just glue the thatch directly to the XPS, so I milled these pieces down and attached them as backing for the thatch. This is not what I ended up doing, but we'll get to that later. Another thing that I learned is that I do not like just gluing rocks onto foam in an attempt to speed things up. I was hoping this would look better, but it just looked terrible. I think it's important to experiment like this while building. It leads to new methods. They don't always work as intended, but sometimes you can use the new method for something else. This one probably won't be used for anything, but it still wasn't wasted time. Anyway, as you can see, I went back to practicing drawing rocks, which I like the look of much better. The chimney was then attached to the rest of the building with hot glue. In Yeti speed here, we are making the door for the house. I grabbed a piece of basswood, I can never remember what it's called, and cut it to the dimensions from our door template. I then etched in wood slabs with an inkless pen. This gives the impression the door was made from several pieces of wood. I then exaggerate the wood grain again. I also think it's important to cut little chips between the planks of wood to make them feel more believable. For the door handle, I used a small piece of card as the base, and a jewelry ring for the handle. I've done this a few times in the past, but here it is all sped up. The metal straps, again, I'm not sure what these are actually called, does anyone know? Were also made with food grade cardboard and attached with super glue. The door was put in place with hot glue. I wanted to make sure it was set back a bit from the walls to provide some depth. Next is trimming. I made all the trim out of the same wood the door is made out of and attached it with tacky glue. Each window has a frame that goes all the way around. For the rest of the trim, I did my best to match the reference image from the game. I didn't match things perfectly, but again, it was good enough for me. In looking at all the different houses from the game, I did notice that some of them have trim that doesn't make much sense at all. Oh well. Age of Empires is still a blast to play, and let's be honest, no one's looking that closely at the houses. There she is in all her glory. Before we get to the thatched roof, I think it's time to paint. I based everything in burnt umber. I like the undertones it provides better than just a plain black. The plaster sections of the wall were painted with antique white. I did my best to avoid the wood trim so that I didn't have to repaint too much. The chimney was based with pewter gray, and off camera I picked a few rocks to paint a lighter shade and a dark red shade. I then dry brushed the chimney with antique white. I also hit the wood trim with a more orangey brown and then dry brushed with that same antique white here. Metal bits got a mixture of gunmetal and silver. Once everything dried, I hit the entire building with a brown oil wash. I've recently started using oil washes instead of watered down inks or acrylic paints, and I am a huge fan. Guess what I forgot? The blue paint. How am I going to know which buildings are mine if they aren't painted blue? So I went and I painted the appropriate spots with a very vibrant blue and tempered them down off camera with a wash. I was just about ready for the roof when I realized something. I'm creating this house for the first scenario in Rangers of Shadowdeep. There's a village there that has 5 buildings. This will be one of them, but the problem is that some of the clue markers are supposed to be placed inside. So I cut out the bottom of the building. I want the bottom to be able to remain attached for the most part, so I'm using magnets on the floor. I also have some inside the walls of the building. There are enough to keep the floor in place and pick the building up. The first step for the interior is to rip off the paper on the foam core. I'm sure you've all seen this many times. I then created a wood flooring by scoring planks with my inkless pen. I measured these off camera and used my speed square to help out. I then used a wire brush to create wood texture on the foam and painted the wood off camera. You'll see that later. While I have access to the interior, I'm going to add the window panes. These are made with plastic covered in matte Mod Podge. The Mod Podge hides the ugly interior but still provides the illusion of transparency. I've shown this in other videos as well. I cut the plastic to have a little extra on all sides so that I can just glue them to the interior sides of the walls. We are finally ready for the roof. I'm going to be using plumbers' hemp fibers for the thatching. This wasn't super easy to source here in the US. I only found this stuff on eBay and it shipped from the Ukraine. It was kind of expensive, but I think it's worth it. And I saw this method on TikTok, I think, and I'll try to provide a link if I can find it. I cut the fibers into about 2-inch long strands with scissors. I found this to be the right length so that it was easy to work with, but also provided enough excess that it didn't have to be perfect in the next step. I cut food-grade cardboard into about 1.5 inch strip and attached the hemp fibers using hot glue. I tried a bunch of different methods before I finally landed on this one. What I do is I lay a small section of glue, then grab a chunk of the fibers and spread them out a bit right above the glue. This allows the glue to cool a little. I then press the fibers into the glue. I use one hand to hold the fibers in place and the other to mash the fibers into the glue. This can be a huge mess if you don't get the thatch properly adhered. Once the glue was completely cooled, I took the strips over to a garbage can and cleaned up the edges. To achieve the look I was going for, I wanted the edges to be mostly straight and not jagged. Next, and last, was to glue the thatch strips to the roof. I eyeball measured and cut with scissors before attaching the strips with hot glue. I had to work around the chimney and a few other slightly tricky areas, but overall this wasn't very difficult. Now, onto the good bits. Oh, I did say I needed 5 buildings for the scenario, right? I used the 3 Feudal Age houses from the Britons as examples, and mirrored 2 of them. This stone floor doesn't seem to fit the vibe. We're gonna have to fix that. Thanks a ton for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe for more.